I never thought betrayal could wear pearls and satin. There I was, third row at my younger sister's wedding in Charleston, South Carolina, wearing the only cocktail dress I owned. It was navy, a little outdated, but clean. I sat with my back straight, hands folded, trying to disappear into a sea of elegance and curated smiles. My son Theo sat beside me, his little legs swinging under the table. 2 double shifts paid for that tiny tux. Worth every hour he lit up every time someone called him handsome. He looked so proud, beaming every time someone walked past and called him handsome. He thought this day would make us feel included again. Maybe I did too. Ava. My sister glided through the room like she'd been born to wear a veil. She always had that kind of gravity. Photogenic, magnetic, adored, especially by our mother. Ava got praised for everything. I got compared for anything. She was the star. I was the backdrop. Still I came. I clapped. I cheered. I helped Theo straighten his tie before the ceremony. And I kept smiling when someone leaned in and said, "Wait, you're the older one." "No way. You don't look old enough to have a 9-year-old. Then came the speeches. First up, the best man. Some inside jokes, awkward chuckles, the usual. Then Ava stood. A hush fell. She raised her champagne flute and gave that camera-ready smile she'd perfected since high school. "I just want to thank you all for being here," she said, voice syrupy and smooth. "This day means so much. And of course I have to say something about my big sister Claire." I turned to Theo and gave him a small smile. He grinned back, eyes glowing. For a second, I believed she might say something kind. Ava continued, "Claire has always been an example." Pause. "She's a single mom, strong, independent, and clearly unwanted by anyone else." The laughter hit instantly, louder than the music. Glasses clinked, chairs shifted, my stomach twisted. Surely I misheard. But Ava just kept grinning like she'd dropped the cleverest punchline of the night. Then, from the head table, my mother chimed in, her voice carrying with deliberate volume. "She's a used product, but hey, she still scrubs up nicely." Another wave of laughter. Crueler this time. Theo tugged on my sleeve. "Mom," he whispered, his voice small and broken. "Why did Aunt Ava say that I didn't have an answer?" My napkin was balled tight in my fist, soaked from my palm. I looked around. Someone had to see this for what it was, but no one met my eyes. My grandfather stared at his water glass. My cousin typed something into her phone. Even my uncle, who once called me the heart of the family, looked away. Theo's little brows pulled tight, unsure, hurt, and that was the moment I cracked. His mother, the woman who bandaged his skinned knees, who stayed up late drilling long division flashcards, was being ridiculed by her own blood. Max didn't understand the weight of their laughter, but I did. And in that moment, I wanted nothing more than to grab his hand and leave. Just walk out of the grand ballroom, past the ice sculpture, the champagne tower, the curated perfection, never look back. But something in me didn't move. My body betrayed my will. I wanted to speak, to stand and say, "You have no idea what I've survived," to scream that I was more than their pity, their gossip, their joke. But my throat locked. My legs trembled under the linen-covered table. And then I heard it, a chair sliding back. Sloane's fiancé, Jackson Reed, stood, slowly, deliberately. He didn't glance at Sloane, didn't look at the guests. His eyes landed straight on me, and the room changed. Not a rescue, not a scene. Something colder, sharper, a reckoning. In my family, being the older sister didn't mean leading the way. It meant absorbing the shame first. I'm Erin Blake, 35, single mom, the stain on a family obsessed with appearances. I live with Max in a 2-bedroom walk-up in Savannah. Sundays are pancakes. I patch his jeans. He calls me Mom the Fixer. It's not glamorous, but it's ours, and it's honest. My family sees that as failure. My mother Margot thinks the Blake name deserves better. That's why she called Sloane's wedding our second debut, a chance to show the world we were still golden. Sloane is 5 years younger than me. Always dazzling, always cushioned. She has Margot's smile and Margot's protection. If Sloane tripped, she got silk pillows. When I stumbled, I got lectures. When I got pregnant at 26, my boyfriend promised a life together. By the 5th month, he was gone. No goodbye. No explanation. My family did ask questions. They offered conclusions. Disappointment disput Max when I held him. It was like every cruel word turned to static. Still, I hoped they see me again. Not as the shame, but as someone trying. So when Sloane's invitation arrived, I said yes. Even though they misspelled my name. Even though I wasn't in the wedding party. Even though I rented my dress and curled my hair in a motel mirror, while Max practiced saying, "Congratulations," I told myself this was closure. That maybe, just maybe, this was an olive branch. Thevenue was. Surreal white roses blanketing the hedges, gold-rimmed place cards, a string quartet playing La Vienne Rose. Sloane shimmered like bridal royalty. When she saw Mesh blinked like she hadn't expected me to actually show up. "Max is getting big," she said before turning away. And that when I knew this wasn't a reunion, it was a stage, and I'd just been cast as the punch. And when the laughter hit, it landed like a slap. No hand, no warning. Just the sting of 100 eyes pretending not to see. Max looked up at me confused. "Why are they laughing, Mom?" he whispered, his voice barely louder than the clinking silverware. I couldn't answer. My throat burned. My fingers twisted the napkin in my lap like a lifeline. I wanted to say something, anything, to shield him, but there were no words that could undo what had just happened. No explanation that would make sense to a 9-year-old who thought this night was supposed to be beautiful. I scanned the room, hoping for one kind face. Uncle Dean stared at his drink. Elise was texting under the table. Even Grandpa Walter, who once called me Little Lightning when I was a kid, refused to meet my eyes. The ache in my chest wasn't new, but watching Max's face twist in confusion, that was a new kind of pain. I'd learned to take the shame. I'd made peace with being invisible. But this was different. I thought about standing, about walking out, no speech, no drama. Just me, Max, and whatever pride I could gather on the way to the door. But something stopped me. It wasn't fear. It was something colder, deeper. It was fury. Not the kind that explodes, the kind that settles in your bones, the kind that watches, measures. Then I heard it, a chair scraping slowly against polished wood. Jackson, Sloane's fiancé, polished, predictable. He stood not with anger but with intent. He didn't look at Sloane or Margot or the crowd. He looked at me, and the room changed. Forks paused mid-air. A waiter froze beside the champagne tower. Even the string quartet trailed off bowstrings hovering mid-note. Jackson didn't speak right away. He didn't need to. The tension was tight as wire. Our eyes met. He didn't look sorry for me. He looked resolute. I braced myself for the usual a joke, a save a line to bring the mood back. But Jackson didn't blink. He stepped toward the mic. Sloane's hand twitched as if to stop him, but didn't. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at anyone, just me. Then he spoke. Everyone laughed, like mocking a woman who built a life from scratch was entertainment. Like raising a child alone made me less. Max's smile disappeared. He leaned into me, whispering, "Why did she say that? What does it mean I had no answer?" I couldn't protect him from this moment. Couldn't explain why the people who smiled at him minutes ago were now laughing at his mother. I scanned the room again. No one met my eyes. Some stared at their forks. Others checked their phones. Even Grandpa Walter, who once called me lion-hearted for winning a 3rd-grade spelling bee, looked down at his plate. I could have taken it if it were just about me. I'd swallowed worse, learned to fold humiliation into silence and keep going. But Max, watching him try to make sense of it, that broke something. So I stood. Not to make a scene. Not to speak. I just couldn't keep sitting in the shame they'd served with the salad course. My chair scraped softly against the floor. My hands trembled. I reached for Max's hand. I was ready to leave, quietly, with whatever dignity I had left. But before I could take a step, another chair scraped louder this time. From the head table, Jackson, Sloane's fiancé, the golden boy. The one who played nice. He stood slowly, pale, jaw tight. Without a word, he reached for the microphone in front of her and took it. Sloane's mouth opened in surprise, but no words came. The room froze. No music, no whispers, just that brittle, breathless quiet. Jackson stood with one hand still on the table, the other gripping the mic. His eyes didn't go to Sloane, or Margot, or the guests. He looked straight at me, and in that gaze, I saw no pity, just a quiet wait, a decision already made. For a moment, I thought he'd smooth it over, say something diplomatic, charming, forgivable. But he didn't. He didn't smile. He didn't flinch. His voice broke the silence like glass. Aaron, don't go. I froze. So did the room. Sloane stiffened. Margot tensed. The DJ's hand hovered near the music controls but stopped when Jackson raised his. I can't pretend I'm okay with what just happened, he said. And just like that, the room finally started to shift. I won't stand up here and let that kind of cruelty pass as comedy. The words landed like a thunderclap. The room held its breath. No one moved. No one sipped. Even the champagne bubbles seemed to pause mid-rise. Jackson stepped out from behind the head table, not rushed, not theatrical, just steady, deliberate, like he was walking through cement through generations of silence and performative smiles. He stopped by our table. Me, Max, 2 untouched salad plates, a napkin I'd crushed into a ball in my lap. Jackson looked directly at the crowd. I've heard a lot about this family over the past year, he said, about loyalty legacy keeping up appearances. But what I just witnessed wasn't family. That was mockery in a tuxedo. Chairs shifted, glasses clinked nervously. A few guests glanced toward Margot. Others stared deep into their champagne like it might swallow them whole. He turned to Sloane. She looked frozen, not in grace, but in guilt. You mocked your sister, Jackson said evenly, for raising her son alone, for surviving, for showing up. And worse, you did it in front of her child. Sloane opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Not a word, not a smile, not even her signature practiced shrug. She didn't ask to be put in that position, Jackson continued, but she came anyway. She sat quietly in the back. She smiled. She brought her son to celebrate you, and you turned that into a joke. I'd never seen Sloane look small before. Not once. But in that moment, all the sparkle drained from her like cheap glitter in rain. Jackson turned back to the room. Aaron didn't ask for sympathy. She's never needed a stage. But I won't marry into a family that confuses cruelty for humor and shame for tradition. If that's the price of admission, I'm out. A ripple went through the guests. Audible gasps. One woman whispered, "Oh my God!" A fork dropped somewhere near the cake table. Max clutched my hand tighter. Jackson looked at him and gave a soft, quiet nod. Your mom's the strongest person in this room, he said. Don't forget that. My breath caught, stuck somewhere behind my ribs. And then he turned to the crowd one last time. I've seen enough. He placed the microphone gently on the table and walked out. Not stormed, not fled, just left. Straight down the aisle, past the string quartet, past the shocked stares and frozen smiles, past Margot. Gone. I stood there still holding Max's hand. The music didn't start. No one clapped. No one spoke. The silence was absolute, like someone had unplugged the entire event. The fairy tale cracked. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one left broken. People glanced at me then away, at Sloane, at the door Jackson had vanished through. Sloane stood there at the head table, wilted. Her posture, the one she'd practiced for months, finally gave way. Her shoulders sagged like she'd been struck. She looked around for approval, but all she found were eyes full of discomfort, shock, shame, a few disgust, and none of it aimed at me. Margot was the first to speak. She stood abruptly, her chair screeching. What an ungrateful boy, she hissed. He humiliated you in front of everyone, just like your sister's selfish. But Margot's voice, once the final word in every room, didn't land this time. It didn't echo. It didn't hush the crowd. It just fell flat, like the weight behind it had vanished, and for the first time in my life I didn't shrink beneath her words. I didn't flinch. I didn't feel small. I just looked at her and felt nothing. I turned to Max. He looked up unsure. "Are we leaving?" he asked quietly. "Yes, baby," I whispered, smoothing a curl away from his forehead. "We're going home." I stood tall, straighter than I had all night. I took his hand, and we walked. The crowd parted like water. Some people avoided my gaze. Others looked like they wanted to say something but didn't. Couldn't. Halfway to the exit, a voice called out soft-aged, trembling. "Aaron." I turned. Grandpa Walter. Pale, eyes red-rimmed. He stood slowly, hands slightly shaking. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have stopped it. Years ago." I nodded. I couldn't speak. I wasn't angry. I understood what silence costs people. I'd lived it, but I also wasn't carrying that silence anymore. It was his to hold now, not mine. Outside, the air was cooler than I expected. Clean, sharp, honest. Max squeezed my hand. "Is the wedding over?" I looked down at him. "Yeah," I said with a tired smile. "I think it ended exactly how it needed to." We drove home in silence, no radio, just the hum of the road and the soft tap of Max's fingers on the window. When I tucked him in that night, he didn't ask any more questions. He didn't need to. The next morning, my phone was lit up with missed calls from cousins I hadn't heard from in years, from guests whose names I barely remembered. I ignored them all. A friend texted me, "You need to see this. Jackson's speech. Facebook. 50,000 views." I opened the link. There it was. Jackson's voice, calm and sharp, slicing through a ballroom of smug silence. And there I was, frozen in the frame, holding Max's hand. The comments poured in hero. She deserved better. I'm crying. Every single mom felt seen. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just felt still, like something inside me had finally stopped clenching after years of gripping too hard. Later that week, Sloan tried to control the narrative. Said Jackson overreacted, that it was all just a joke, that people were too sensitive. But the truth had already landed, and no one was laughing anymore. A few days later, a bouquet of wildflowers showed up at my door. No note, just a small card tucked in the stems, to the lioness. I didn't need to wonder who sent it. The wedding never happened. But something far more important did. For once, I wasn't the one carrying the shame. I didn't have to explain myself. I didn't have to apologize. I walked out of that room with my son, my dignity, and my head held high. And somewhere out there, a man reminded an entire room, and maybe the internet, what it actually means to be strong. Sloan returned to her curated life like none of it had happened. The photos vanished from her Instagram. No captions, no explanations. And no, she never reached out. I didn't expect her to. Margot called once, not to apologize, not to ask if Max was okay. She said I'd embarrassed the family. All you had to do was laugh along. I let her speak for 30 seconds. Then I said something I never thought I'd say. "I'm not your scapegoat anymore." Then I hung up. It wasn't loud. It was clean, quiet, final. And for the first time, I felt no guilt for saying goodbye. That moment taught me something simple. I didn't need permission to see my own worth. My life didn't magically transform. I still work long hours, still burn the toast, still make 2 dinners pancakes for Max, roasted broccoli for me. But something's different now. I don't step into rooms hoping to be tolerated. I walk in knowing I belong. Max changed too. He asks more thoughtful questions about kindness, silence, and what it means to speak up. He talks about Jackson like he's Captain America. Sometimes I catch him lining up his toys like they're an audience giving little speeches to defend the quiet kid. And I know he saw something that night, something that will stay with him longer than the glitter and the vows. One evening while brushing our teeth, Max looked at me in the mirror. "Mom, are you still sad about what Aunt Sloan said?" I paused. "Not anymore." "Why?" He shrugged toothpaste on his chin. because I think you won, even though it wasn't a fight. That stayed with me, because he was right. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I simply stood, took my son's hand, and walked away. And someone else, someone unexpected, stood beside me. Not out of pity, but out of principle. Jackson reminded an entire room what real decency looks like. Not the kind that wears a tuxedo or delivers toasts, but the kind that sees cruelty and says, "Not today." So, no, I didn't dance at my sister's wedding, but I left with something better: self-respect, clarity, and my son beside me. That was the ending no one expected, and exactly the one I deserved. If this stayed with you, leave a comment. And if you're looking for more stories that do the same, subscribe and stay a while. Thank you for being here.